So welcome everybody to this month's Accountability Performance Panel held in Police Headquarters on Friday, the 12th of September. First item up is the public agenda and public question time. And Francine, I think you have two or three questions.
Yes,
So over to you, please, and then we'll decide who asks which parts.
Right, okay. With regards to the last use of force report back in July,
Yep.
having looked at it in depth, I'm quite alarmed at some of the things I've found. So these questions have come out of that report. So, first one, black people are 8.4 times more likely to be stopped for offensive weapons, yet the fine rate is lower than for white people. So how do you justify this disproportionate and less effective use of the practice?
Okay, well, thank you, Francine. That question is directed to me as the PCC. So from our point of view, it's very clear in the police and crime plan. It's essential everybody is treated equally, regardless of background and ethnicity. And this is an ongoing issue that we do work very hard at in conjunction with ISRI. As you know, of course, you're involved in that. And if I'm unable to come to the public meetings there is always someone there from the OPCC. In addition to that, of course, we do dip sampling and work with ISRI and others. And when things don't quite go correctly, then we're there. So part of the role we have on the OPCC is to hold the constabulary to account. And I really do hope that we can make more progress on that. I know the force works very hard on that, and I know those figures do look disturbing, but I just really want to assure everybody in public that's why we have that good working relationship. When things perhaps don't quite go right, which does happen on occasion, there's no point in denying that. The lessons are learned. I know that's a phrase that everybody mentions, but it is absolutely crucial, certainly in my role personally, as trying to represent everybody that's suffered. Everything is possible to do. So it is to directly answer the question, to justify it is difficult, and I quite understand the concerns there on that. But I do want to assure you personally, we in the team and myself, and I know I can speak with the constabulary on that because of the meetings, we really do look very, very hard at this to see what we can do. Coupled with that, the work that we do through our crime disorder reduction grants and so on, I do help, will improve, and I think there is some evidence that does help reduce the tensions there, because it's very, very important that we do act cohesively as a whole community. Those are not just words. I think what we've done, and I think you know some of the things that we've done with yourselves and other groups, it will help, but there is still much more to do on it. So I don't want anyone to think we're complacent, and we will try and, well, we'll redouble our efforts on that. And any ideas you've got for that as well, they'll always be welcome. They always have been, because it is an important issue. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. But I think from my next few questions,
Yep.
which I am going to read them all out at
Yeah,
the
that's
same
fine.
time, so that you can just have a clear response. Black under 18s are 9.2 times more likely to be searched for weapons. When looking at the stop and search forms by ISRI, the most looked for or found is for cannabis. So if that is the case, this means that black people are being unfairly treated. So what measures are going to be introduced to deal with that? Also, black and minority ethnic people are more likely to be handcuffed during stop and search. What safeguards are in place to prevent handcuffs being used as a default response? In the report, it said that the scrutiny panel, which I sit on, we highlighted officers using inappropriate language. And one of those searches was for a young black man who had been called by his intoxicated girlfriend to come and pick her up.
Mhm.
And on approaching, officers assumed that it was unwanted attention from the female and dealt with him in that manner. And when it was found by the intoxicated female that she had indeed called him to come and pick her up, the officer's response was to the person who's being stopped and searched, don't play the race card,
Yeah.
which I find offensive. And also, this has been going on for years. We've always been asking, the community has always been asking, why is there disproportionality for Black people with regards to stop and search? And I know there's lots of work being done. I know that we have scrutiny of the stop and search forms. I know that there's training being put in place. And I know that officers are spoken to, but time and time again, this has not changed. And what my concern is that there's a trend that is going up now.
Okay.
And in light of the report, in the force's own report, with these findings, is just not acceptable. And I would like some action taken on digging into why we have that disproportionality.
Okay. Now, thank you, Francine. First of all, I will just I'm really sorry and apologise for that comment about don't play the race card. I'm just saying that from a public point of view. Obviously, you've asked the constabulary to comment on these other things because that's not acceptable. I absolutely get that. I personally would feel very upset if I'd been in that position, the person that had been said to me, and there is no place there. It is something that we take very, very seriously, and I know those are words, and I know since I first met you all those years ago, there has been progress, but there is still a lot more to do. So this sort of feedback is very, very helpful, and it's obviously down to the Rachel and senior officer to embed the training. It's always developed, and I think what I will say is that relationship we have with ISPRI is really, really crucial. And whilst it's not necessarily to do with other forces, and I know we've been held up as having very good relationships nationally, a good example, but I don't want that to become across that there isn't much more to do, because there is. And, you know, when I've been to some of these police powers reference groups, some of the language put down, and I know we pick out ones which have gone wrong, but they also do pick up ones that have gone very well. I think that's important to remember. And yes, it's about redoubling efforts of training and so on, which clearly is an operational one. I will say that here, but it is about working together. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So I'm going to hand over to is it for you, Rachel, Rob, just to go through those points before we move on, because it is important, and I don't want anybody listening to this in future to think this is just a token few words.
Okay.
You know, we're doing a lot to try and help with Black and ethnic minority communities in all sorts of areas as well, and no doubt there's more to do, because we've got to treat everybody the same. And
Okay.
I'm absolutely committed to that.
Okay, so I'm speaking on behalf of my community,
Sure.
and I just want to allay fears that Black people in Suffolk are not being over-policed and underserved, because that's what it feels like, and the data shows that's what it looks like. And with respect, please don't tell me about the training that you're doing or you take it very seriously. I want to know why we have this disproportionality, because if we want trust and confidence in policing, if you want people to come forward as witnesses, if you want the community to give you intelligence, if you want people to report crime because they're victims, if you want people to feel safe, we have to have all communities that feel that they have a police service that is there to serve the community.
All right, thanks, Steve. Robert, over to you, please.
I think the first point to acknowledge is that Black communities in Suffolk and elsewhere in the UK are over policed and underprotected. So there is disproportionality, and that needs to be addressed because it's unfair. That's the starting point. I'm happy to acknowledge that we've still got work to do on that. The second point I'd say on the underprotected is that young men are more at risk and vulnerable to the threat of violence than other sections. And actually, the research we've done shows that young Black men are even more vulnerable to that. So when we're talking about research for offensive weapons specifically, drugs, as you mentioned, is the biggest reason for stop and search. What we're trying to do is use one tactic, stop and search, among many others, to try to stop young people being vulnerable to and feeling unsafe with their friends and their families from violent crime. And while we're not getting that right every time, we are very overall in Suffolk that in tackling gang crime, and we've got an excellent gangs unit led by Ian Brown to tackle those causes and things, and in violent crime, we're actually succeeding in keeping more people young people safe, and the stop and search is one of the ways we use it.
I'm sorry, can I just stop you there? Using stop and search to protect young people because they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
Is not a good tactic to use on young people. It has such a negative impact, not only on their interactions with the police for future interactions, but also on their mental health, as in, why me, especially when there's no fines. So I don't accept that you can use that young people are being vulnerable, and that's why you're using stop and search, because that's such an invasive thing to use.
I slightly disagree, Fran. So I think when we explain the powers, we explain well what our reasons are. We record it on body worn, and it's supervised, and we give all the rights. I think a lot of people are really worried about violent crime and will then understand it. And it goes back to what Police and Crime Commissioner said about when we look at the videos and review the forms, there's a lot of very good practice and it's intelligence led. So while there's lots of research and different perspectives, and it's the police's job to look at it, we also feel strongly that when it's used responsibly and well, stop and search is a really important power. Otherwise, we wouldn't use it. What the report shows is that our use of stop and search has come down. So we try to be really responsible there, and outcomes are much higher than most constabularies. So we're targeting a lot more the right place. It's not. It's a really hard, difficult tactic to use well and to use consistently. And I would say at the moment, despite all our efforts, and part of the reason we put so much work into it, is when we get it wrong, and we do, like you described, and like the language used in that particular case, lots of people talk about it, and it really undermines trust and confidence, which is really unhelpful for everyone. Superintendent John Chapman fed back specifically to that person about the impact of saying that, and to their students. So we part of the value of having that community confidence is when we get things wrong, we can be really clear about going back to people on it. I think drugs is, I know your question is mainly about offensive weapons, but we have to be particularly careful when we're looking at drugs. But drug use destroys and undermines the health of a lot of young people as well. And we get a lot of complaints about the use of drugs and concern from parents and communities about use of drugs. So again, I think it's a legitimate target for us to go after drugs. And of course, we look at the causes and supplies and things with our Sentinel and Scorpion teams as well. I think our community scrutiny is among the best in the country.
Absolutely, I agree.
But I don't think we can explain disproportionality ourselves. It's been I think we do the work with ISWE since 2009.
Yeah.
And we keep trying to understand it. I don't think we're suddenly going to be able to say this is the core disproportionality, this is what we do about it. I think we just need to keep working on looking at it and showing it. The other factor that I'd say, I don't want to get into justifying people coming in and out, because I know that that has some measure, but I don't think it gets to the heart of things. I would just say that from the police point of view, our less experienced officers often are clumsier in the application of stop and search because they're trying to remember all the powers and rights, and we work hard on that. But while we've got a lot more inexperienced police officers coming to Suffolk, really good to have the numbers, and many of them do a really good job, and more inexperienced supervisors, we have to expect that we'll still get it wrong sometimes. It's not like just finding the formula and then it will be really good. The reality is that lots of the people doing the stop and search will have less than 3 years policing experience themselves and need the kind of advice and feedback. And then my final point on it is the more representative Suffolk Constabulary is in terms of the ethnicity and the experience themselves, the more likely we are to do stop and search well and win trust and confidence back. And that's the other important aspect, the more representative. So when we're doing stop and search, it's not so us and them.
Can I just
Still
respond?
very
to
brief
that?
because we
Yeah.
need to move.
I'll finish that by saying, although you may not know why the disproportionality is happening, for members of the Black community, it feels like racial profiling.
Yeah.
And the data looks like racial profiling. So I would say to you, Tim, what measures are you going to put in place? What targets are you going to put in place to have a look at why this is happening? Because this has been going on for years and years.
Yep,
and
yep.
years.
Well, I think I can't answer the specific question, but what I would like to do is for you and I to have a get together. See what would actually help. And as what I was going to do is we need to move on to the rest of the
Yeah.
agenda. But I do want to thank you for raising the issues. They are really important. And I have always had this belief, some of these difficulties occur partly because particularly for young people, what are the opportunities, what aspirations? Because actually putting people on the right course, regardless of where they come from or anything like that, is a help. And things are difficult in society, but what we can try and do is work more together, building on some of the work that we've done jointly. More opportunities like that will help. It's not a solution, but I think it will help. But I think what I'll do, I'll take an action, but we will meet up and discuss that further. We haven't got time to do it now. I mean, we need to get it right. And we also need to do it on the basis that whatever plans we put in place or processes, actually it needs to be a flexible approach that you adjust and change it as we go on. But I do want to emphasise, the gratitude for bringing these points up, and the actual point that this is an ongoing process, and I'm absolutely committed to working with you to see what we can do on it. And I know the constabulary are as well. All right, and that's a really serious point. But thank you for raising that, and thank you, Rob, for the answers as well. Right, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on. The next item, the minutes which have been circulated. Did anybody have any comments? And I know all the actions are either have been followed up or are in the process of being followed up. So if everybody's happy with that, that's fine. So we'll then move on then to the financial monitoring, which is Kenneth, because it is only 4 months in, relatively near the beginning of the financial year. But just to emphasise for those listening, the underspend, I think that's largely due to extra income generated and so on. And I don't want people to run away with the idea that everything's dead easy, because it's not. And I still don't think we've had an announcement for the staff pay award yet. That's not been confirmed. And whilst we had one for police, just to remind those listening, 80% of our costs are staffing costs. So a 1 or 2% variation in pay awards can make a big difference, especially if the government doesn't fund it in full. And we don't know the answer to all that yet, but I just wanted to raise that. The good point is, please remember that we, once again, I think it's now been going for a year, have the 3rd lowest recorded crime rate per head of the population in the whole of England and Wales. And bearing in mind resources, I think that is a very, very good performance indeed. So let's remember the positives. So Kenneth, are there any particular points you want to raise, just to draw to note to say early in the financial year? Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much indeed, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'll just kind of through the headlines. You've covered a number of those issues there. We're 4 months in, so it's fairly early days, but we are starting to get a clearer picture in terms of where we think the outturn is going to be at the end of the financial year. overall underspend, sorry, is 1.75 million. Majority of that sits with the constabulary, 1.7 million. We can split that into an operating underspend of about 700,000. And as you say, Chair, about £1 million there in terms of surplus income. So fairly tight to budget on the operating side of the business. Just a few more kind of points on the revenue side of things. We're on target to receive the full Police Uplift Programme grant by being above the 1425 maintenance headcount levels at the end of September. And we've projected those out to the end of March, and they look to be above 1425 at the end of March too. And same for the neighbourhood policing guarantee in terms of hitting our targets and projections for NPG this financial year, and also on target for savings. That's it from a revenue side. On the capital side, it's early days, so we are forecasting to budget for capital. But what sits underneath that are a whole load of tenders that are being run at the moment and orders placed, and there's various kind of lead times for some of the bigger capital items. So we'd expect a little more movement on the capital budget in the second half of the financial year. And key headlines, happy to take any questions.
Okay. I'll come to Colette in a minute, but just to remind people listening, because we've got £1.8 million extra for this year for the neighbourhood policing guarantee, not as we originally thought, 900,000 quid. And of course, the hotspot policing, that's £1 million as well, isn't it? So that's all included as well. Okay, Colette, have you got any points you wanted to raise?
Nothing better.
You're happy with that? And for those listening, please have a look at the PCC revenue budget there, just to remind you that we've got the various grants there, things like the domestic abuse perpetrator programme, that's at 2.5, and of course the serious violence duty also at 2.5. That is a multi-agency approach, and interesting that came up at the meeting about Clearhold Build yesterday. So multi-agency approaches are always very, very welcome for looking at them. Okay. Good. Anybody got any other points? No? Right. And then if you're happy, Colette, then we're all happy. Good. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item then is the supporting vulnerable victims. Alice, over to you. Thank you. Just a brief summary and then we'll go to questions, please. Thank you.
So I'll probably start with the officer conclusion then. So notable achievements include our rising solved rates for RADO cases, which is really welcome and as a result of really systemic work. Continued use of protected orders, not just in domestic abuse cases, but also proactive engagement and a number of pieces of work around diverse communities to improve our hate crime reporting, which again is really welcome. There's significant more work to do in that space. We've got the upcoming transition with the new victim support provider. And we've obviously talked quite extensively over the last few weeks of the reopening of the SARC as well, which is really welcome. So this report overall reflects a really comprehensive and evolving strategy to enhance our victim support services across Suffolk. There are just a few areas within the report probably like to just draw attention to. So we know court backlogs continue to be significant, and this is mentioned in all the papers I'll raise today. I don't make apologies for it because it causes real systemic pressure. We know that we've got further delays emerging in the Magistrates' Court as well as the Crown Courts, and the impact across our FORS team, our victim witness care team and frontline officers means the number of cases that they are holding and the period that they are holding them for is really exponentially continuing to grow. We also know the National Metrics pilot has taken place, so looking at the Victims Code and the Compliance Framework section. The national metrics work took place between May and July last year, and the MOJ have been considering its next steps. We're waiting for the final metrics to be confirmed, and they're not expected now to report back early 26, and then a second pilot will be planned for 27. So all of our work and our measuring and metrics will continue to monitor as they are at the moment, and we will develop that moving forwards as we need to. You'll have seen the statistics in there around our compliance with what we manage and measure around the Victims Code. There's further compliance work, and the victims subgroup is now focused for the next period on rights 7, 6 and 3, which is around key investigative updates in a timely manner, providing written acknowledgements to victims that those crimes have been reported, and we have got further planned training around Victims Code to support compliance around those metrics. But good progress has been made overall. I'm not going to go through the data around the witness care unit, other than average workloads for those caseworkers are between 1 and 200 cases per worker, which is really significant and symptomatic of the court backlogs. On the good news front then, so the beginning of October, we'll see our new provider for victim support services. As you'll be aware, Catch-22 taking over the contract for Norfolk and Suffolk. I'm really looking forward to working with them and really looking forward to seeing the energy that will be going into our repeat victims and the highest cohorts in that space. In respect of violence against women and girls then, a new strategy, as you'll be aware, was published in April 2025, and that gives us our priorities for the following 3 years. This is called the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls, published on our website. The county-wide action plan has been in place and is being refreshed as a result of that. A particular focus around supporting victims. Our rape scrutiny panel continues to meet quarterly, which is reviewing in depth our rape investigations and serious sexual assault. And you can see from the paper the number of agencies that are involved in that. And then the Domestic Abuse Joint Action Plan has been implemented. There's a new Domestic Abuse Joint Operational Information Meeting, and it's called DAJ-OIM. Easier said than done, but both police and CPS are in attendance at that, and that's looking specifically to identify and remove any barriers to successful prosecutions of the cohorts that we have now. High level around domestic abuse then, around investigations. Over the last 12 months, the recorded domestic abuse crimes in the county have decreased, sitting at 7.5% below the 3-year average, with an average of 631 crimes per month. However, there is a noticeable rise in reports between March and June this year compared to the previous 2 quarters. Not necessarily outlined if you look across all of our crime types and where our peak demand periods started to happen. But of note there to keep an eye on, our non-crime investigations in this space have increased over the same 12-month period, 7.7% rise, which we have got a close eye on. The solved rates for domestic abuse crimes over the last 12 months was at 13%. It's reflecting a slight decrease in the percentage compared to the previous report. But however, the actual number of solved cases increased from 942 to 963 during the same period. I won't go into the detail of how ancillary orders work. There's quite a bit in this report and all previous reports in this space, so I won't, Janet and John, for everybody. I will just draw attention to the fact that Suffolk's making consistent use of DVPNs over time. The average now has continued to increase to an average of 8 a month. And as you'll know, we do the initial serving of the orders while people are in custody, and then retrospectively within 48 hours we go to the court and apply to the court to further extend that. And 81% of those are granted in the magistrates' court, which is a good success rate for the continuing protection in that space. On the DVDS domestic disclosures scheme then, we've got a significant amount of work in there. Our applications under both schemes, both Clare's Law and the CODS scheme, have continued to increase, particularly in DVDS. So as a comparison, in 22, there are 819 DVDS applications. As of June 25, there has already been 890 applications this year, indicative of another likely year-on-year increase, which we are monitoring and pleased to see. Under rape and serious sexual offences then, RASO, the really key headline for us in this space is the Ops Soteria self-assessment plan has been completed, charting the progress to date for us as a force. It's been submitted to the Soteria Central team. That is providing statistics to the Home Office, but also doing some benchmarking across forces, and will be providing some feedback for us, which will be really welcome to see how we compare and how we have measured with other forces, which we haven't done before. And the local meetings continue with all of the pillar leads in place and the project manager recording the updates and monitoring our progress. Suffolk Constabularies continue to improve our solved rates for RASO offences, increasing from 5.3 to 9.4% over the last 12 months. This is a marked increase and really welcome. We have desire and passion to go further and harder in that space, so really looking forward to seeing where we'll be in the next 12 months. And the 3-day National Soteria CPD has really successfully been rolled out to all our RASO investigators. You'll see that 90% have completed the training. Those 10% that haven't are those that are either brand new to the role and still in training, or are just onboarding with us as an organisation. And already we've started to roll out the first responder training package, which is being delivered across our RIC teams, and it's being delivered by our own safeguarding investigation unit, who have got extensive experience and can model the training against existing workloads that sits with the teams, which has been really well received. I've touched on the start reopening, which is really welcome. You're aware, and we have discussed the October deadline for ISO accreditation being missed. This is a matter in hands of Mountain Healthcare to achieve, and I know that there's close scrutiny around that and conversations that are ongoing. Under hate crime then, the Constabulary maintains a hate crime delivery plan, which is obviously aligned to the Voluntary Policing APP. This is overseen now by the County Partnership Prevention Hub, which was reformed under the OP model work in the last 2 years. We've got really good engagement at regional and national forums, and we've got considerable pieces of work specifically looking at our response to hate crime in sporting events. We've updated a number of briefing products and looking forward to seeing the development of that work with our commanders in the next few periods. We have seen a slight increase in reporting of hate crimes during this period. This is a continuing trend from 23 and 24 into 25, so it's worth really keeping a close eye on. It does coincide with international conflicts. However, the overall volume remains low and lower than historical average. But race abuse continues to be the most reported type of hate crime, and it's something that we really need to continue to focus our energy on. Probably wasn't going to talk too much detail around any of the other areas, other than just to highlight the joint work with the unaccompanied asylum seeking children team continues, with 30 new unaccompanied asylum seeking children arrivals into the county since the beginning of January, both through the National Transfer Scheme and spontaneous arrivals. The work is going from strength to strength in that area. Take any questions?
Right, well, thank you, Alice, for a comprehensive update. We've got 1 or 2 questions, and we've already answered one or few of them by marketing. Particularly pleased, I'll say straight away about the RASO data there. I mean, that has been an ongoing issue, I think, ever since I started all those years ago, and it's a real step forward. So well done to all involved, and obviously hope that continues to progress. But that really has been a step change, so very, very pleased to see that. And also, I think, again, when you come into this field of statistics, percentages, actual case numbers, etc., wherever you look at it, you've got to understand the data. So the actual number of solved cases for domestic abuse, as opposed to percentage, that is also very encouraging. And I just wanted to ask on that, with the investment that's been in digital technology, rapid video response, how do you think that's helping? It's been a while now, just a comment, not
So, as you'll be aware from the reporting that we give you, the trust and confidence in the cohorts that we're sampling around the use of the AVR process is really significant. It's constantly in the 80s or high 80s for people that are using that service. And there is also an expression of preference in that space too. So we're really grateful for that. You're also aware that we've done a low-level pilot around the use of EVR and where else in the organisation we might be able to use that technology. Next steps for us at the moment is we're in a scoping process for a broader pilot, and the pilot will look at EVR and how we can further grow the technology with the advancement and the capabilities we've got, the crime types that we could use, and the scalability options for that technology in the DAVR and the EVR space. We're also going to consider it in the context of the CCC, the digital team, and the front desk and the online digital space for access to the organisation. So really excited for that piece of work, which is a really quick piece of work for us with really good investment of some key people in the organisation in order to move it forward, and pretty excited towards the end of the year to see what the options and scalable proposals are going to be.
Okay, good. One of the other points I think is important, we call it the National Domestic Abuse Joint Justice Action Plan. I presume it's in early days, but it talks about removing barriers. What sorts of things might that include from your point of view? Because obviously working together is one of what sort of things it's likely to cover.
It's a really good question. So a lot of the reporting in this space covers the joint space with Jules's World and my space as well. Jules, I don't know if there's anything you particularly want to highlight there.
So there's a lot contained in the Joint Justice Action Plan.
Yeah.
It's picked up jointly with CPS and the criminal justice teams. It's predominantly looking at improved timeliness and service to victims, and process through the courts. So ultimately, the conversations around special domestic courts
Right.
and how the sittings work, etc., with HOCTS. But predominantly, the front end for us is very much focused on file quality, file content,
Sure.
and making sure we're getting it right first time, effectively, but improve service to victims.
So presumably we'll get some further feedback at the local criminal justice forum.
Yes.
On that as well.
So, yeah, more than happy we can do. It will come through to the joint operational improvement meeting, which is CPS and police, which I attend, the strategic one.
Okay.
But we can provide feedback as required.
Good. Okay, no, thanks, Jules. And just to emphasise, Alice, you put about the huge pressure at 3.7 on the victim and witness work capacity and the caseload for people there. And I just want to say that publicly, people still need to understand the huge pressure that is there because of the delay in court cases, be it magistrates and Crown Courts. No good for victims. And I know that's not directly to do with the police at all, but the problem is it's an extra burden and of course an extra cost, never mind the human costs of victims not having their cases heard. So it really does need to be a huge emphasis nationally on getting this problem dealt with.
And again, if I may,
Yeah.
that is Jules' team that is providing that support.
Yeah.
So we can feed that back through
Yeah.
Julie
Have
too.
you got any support from us over here on that? Because I mean, I think it's shocking. And that, as I've said before, that is a legacy of successive governments of all colours going back 20, 25 years of failing to invest and take these issues seriously. And it won't do. But we'll keep plugging away. That's good. Could I ask one question? I didn't understand the graph, Alice, at the bottom of page 4, where there's a sudden plummet in the plum coloured line going from 82% down to about 10%. Is that an error? Were you able to unpick that for us? Because I didn't quite understand. Was something gone strangely wrong, or was it just an error?
Might be that the data is available to a certain point and then it assumes there's no data and therefore it just naturally drops.
Yeah.
It can go away and check that and come back to
We
me.
No, I think that is the case.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's just because it's a public document. Don't want someone to suddenly pick up on us.
I think normally what would happen is the line would finish
Yeah.
at the top and then we wouldn't have to drop, but I think probably what it's automatically
Yeah.
done is.
Okay, well, we'll just make a note of that. Some feedback on that would be helpful. Freddie, you've got some questions this morning, Ross. Can you answer that matter?
Yeah, just on that, I mean, just generally on the actual overall victims code compliance, it's very, very similar to the last report as well. There are a few areas that dip slightly, but I know they're also the areas that are focused kind of in that as well. But it was kind of, yeah, just anything on observations or comments on targeting those, or what is viewed as a good level of compliance at this stage, bearing in mind, I know MOJ is still kind of, yeah, going to come back to us in terms of.
But there is no indication really of what good looks like, peculiarly. And obviously there has been a really protracted period where we've been waiting for what comes next, a number of years now that we've been in this space. So we haven't taken our foot off the ball or our intention or our training or our energy while we're waiting for that to happen. As you know, and we've talked about before, some of this comes down to, because we do an enormous amount of auditing in this space as well. Our inspectors all have to do audits, as does the joint space as well. We know that some of this comes down to data quality and recording, and some of it comes down to doing it. It's really interesting. Some of this will be a really protracted one box in a number of fields that has to be ticked to say that we've done something. The other really interesting point is around victim impact. That statement can be taken at any point during an investigation. Doesn't just have to be taken at the beginning. And in fact, sometimes in some investigation, a number of victim impacts will be taken over the course of the investigation and getting something to court. So that measure is always a little bit of a peculiar anomaly within our data, because it may not be appropriate for a victim for us to take it straight away, and they may want to give you a longer term view of how it's made them feel, or even as things have progressed in terms of losses, etc. So some of these are they're high level metrics that we use to measure. They are not the totality of the picture, and we would like to move more into the space longer term of looking at what the positive feedback in this space looks like as well.
Can I just come in on that as well? Because actually, victims code compliance is managed through the criminal justice team jointly. So my Chief Inspector, Helen Howes, does a significant amount of work on this, and there's been work in Alice mentioned earlier around Catch-22. She's done a significant amount of work around bringing those together. Alice is right around data quality. So, for example, the victim personal statement element, unless people go back into the system and then provide the update to the system, the data is captured at a specific point in time. So data quality does become an issue for us.
One thing I just wanted to point out to people, and I hope this isn't a trend, but if you look at page 12, 7.7 on hate crime, particularly the top line right there about racial offences, it's good to see the overall trend is down, but I think it's just worth noting we need to keep an eye on that. Why it is that people can't behave themselves in civil, it's always been beyond me. And of course, racial abuse is the most significant piece of data here. Have you got any comments on that, Alice? Have you noticed anything anecdotally as to why there might be an increase, or is this something you're monitoring? Any particular examples?
We're monitoring this really closely. We've done a lot of work with regionally and nationally to have a look at how we compare to other forces. So are we seeing similar trends? We are seeing a line that follows international conflict. We're seeing quite a lot of changes in trends around things that happen on social media and international reporting. We are working really closely with our diverse communities coordinator and our high harm hub to have a look at what other opportunities there are. And it's also something that's being discussed quite extensively around our teams that are going in and doing the educational work with the schools as well, to see if we can develop some feedback in that space. And as you're aware, we've got the hate crime dashboard that we look at and use with our VBOL data, and it's focused for our community teams, which are expanding to have a look at how we can work with the communities much more closely to understand that.
Good. That's I'm keeping an eye on it. It's important. And then I didn't have a question. Was there?
Commissioner, just on
Yes,
that, well, I think whilst Suffolk haven't been significantly impacted, I think also around hate crime is the national position in relation to public disorder around immigration, hotels and asylum, which also will have an impact in terms of hate crime and community detention monitoring.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. It was, yes, so if I could go now move on then, thanks for that, Jules. The last section 8 on modern slavery. I suppose what I'm really getting at here is we know it happens, and I think it's a particularly awful, heinous crime, thoroughly wicked. There's no excuse for it at all. And I know we don't have high levels of Suffolk, which is really, really good. I'm just wondering, could you just comment, Alice, when it comes to enforcement, the capacity, who else is involved? I know it's not another example, it's not just about policing, but when we were at the Clearhold Build meeting yesterday, that was an issue that came up as something of concern for the area in Ipswich. It's been looked at there. Just wondered what any comments you got on that.
Yeah, do you know, this is really topical. We were talking about this just yesterday at the SSCB. There's an enormous amount of work that's going in at the moment around joint agency, visitation, enforcement activity across various areas across the county, not just in Ipswich, around the new Clearhold Build site. We've got really extensive visits alongside trading standards, fire brigade, local authority, some really, really positive and proactive work that has been commended also by some of our local authority colleagues just this week in that meeting. It's a real focus for us. A lot of those offences that are being picked up are not necessarily policing offences, but we are, with our community teams, completely embedded in those joint agency visits. And they are really showing the benefits of what we can determine by putting all of that information and intelligence together and doing those agency visits collectively. And there's a number of those that have been planned across the coming months as well. So really, really looking forward to seeing how that changes our reporting and our recording. And obviously what comes up in these papers is predominantly what relates to the organisation, but that collective view of what the data and the outcomes are is really quite significant so far this year already. Again, symptomatic of the investment we've made in our neighbourhood policing teams.
That's good. That's good. So, and the final point I just want to mention, you talked about the SART opening. I just want to reassure people that we've discussed this at the weekly conference, haven't we, Rachel, whether actually that's not going to compromise investigations at all. It's something we have to go through, but with the new investment coming in there, it's just worth reassuring people there is no need for concern on any delays to accreditation or anything like that. Good, thank you. Any other points anyone wish to raise on that? No, right, thank you very much, Alice. Let's move on to the next item, which is the offenders.
I'll take a similar approach unless you want me to do it differently.
Well, I think perhaps, well, just highlight points. I think assume people have read the papers, but if there are good points you want to emphasise, I think that is important because that will be recorded. So yeah, off we go, no problem.
Sure. So this paper overall aligns with the police and crime plans committed to evolving offender management practices, and it also highlights the constabulary's adoption of measures such as adult conditional cautions and the new IOM strategy aimed at reducing offending overall. So really significant amount of strategic delivery in this last period, as well as the tactical outputs that we can see in this paper. So the real highlights then, custody, you'll see that through custody continues to grow with a number of positive arrests requirements and people attending for biometrics, which is symptomatic of the energy that we're putting into progressing our investigations in timely manners and dealing with high harm in its priority. Will draw your attention, and again, I'm really conscious that a number of these bits are representative of the Joint Command space as well as local policing, but particularly draw your attention to mental health assessments in custody continuing to be quite challenging with ongoing concerns around bed availability across the Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust. There is really good working relationships between the Joint Justice Command custody team and colleagues in partner agencies. A significant amount of scrutiny and processes that are in place to make sure that that's managed really well. But we are seeing at times individuals who are subject to mental health assessments being cared for in custody for significant periods of time, which is not necessarily what we would want to see. It would be wrong of me not to highlight that in this meeting. You'll be aware of the Independent Custody Scrutiny Panel from across Norfolk and Suffolk and the work that they're doing to make sure that appropriate use of grip-proof clothing, use of force, etc. within custody is appropriate. They also look at appropriate liaison with partners, particularly around children and young persons, and the appropriate level of care and support. We know that medical provision also in custody remains relatively challenging. The contract requires provision of embedded medics within the PICS. And it does remain difficult to provide a full rota coverage across the last 6 months. Again, it's for noting we've got really decent scrutiny and liaison and relationships in place to manage it. So big ticket items around out of court resolutions then. In April, the out of court resolutions were rebranded, as you'll all be aware, as OpDivert. This has reinvigorated the referral process. There's been training completed across the constabulary and an improved use of out-of-court resolution options as a result. In the months just following the launch of OpDivert, there was an average 6% increase, which is really significant. You'll also be aware that the constabulary has changed the primary provision for diversionary courses from Red Snapper to Rise Mutual, not only resulting in a saving considerable for both forces, but the offer consists of facilitated diversionary courses which are paid for by participants with offset costs around individuals. And to complement the external course provision, the RJ team has written a victim impact assessment course on the Think I platform. And that means that we can deliver programmes designed for offenders to understand how victim impact around offences such as ASB, low value criminal damage, thefts and harassment all cause impacts on victims, which is really important. The 50% of income generated from the victim impact awareness course is to be reinvested into new diversionary options, which will contribute to the hardship fund for those who may not be able to pay for their courses. Won't go through the data around positive outcomes. That's all where we would like it to be, and positive and continuing to head in the right direction. I will just draw your attention to the evaluation project being scoped and costed in collaboration with the University of Suffolk to assess our broader impact on out-of-court resolutions. And that will be focusing on 3 areas: the effect of police officer productivity compared to traditional charge and court processes, influence on recidivism and behavioural change, and the legitimacy of out-of-court resolutions from victims' perspective, particularly in terms of satisfaction with outcomes. Moving on then, a really quick highlight around bail. So the current bail data indicates stable averages for us at around 80%, in comparison to 20% RUI, so that's released under investigation. This is in line with the requirements of the new legislation to increase where bail necessary and the proportionate removal of presumption against pre-charge bail. So confident and comfortable with where that is. On RJ then, Suffolk Constabulary has embedded its RJ hub within the offender diversion team, so we call that the ODT. We like acronyms, so reinforcing the commitment to victim-centred outcomes. Every out-of-court resolution investigation now includes an offer of a referral to the RJ service, resulting in an average monthly uptake of 27%, which is well above the national average of 5%, which is really positive. And this has led to the integration of a really significant 800% increase in RJ referrals over the past year, demonstrating our continued growth in restorative practice. And from the victim's perspective, obviously we're continuing to capture qualitative insights to identify the best practice in that space, which is pretty exciting for us as a force. I won't cover the bit around court backlog. I think I've probably done that in the victim space, but I think it's worth noting in the paper. The Domestic Abuse Perpetrator Unit, the DAPU now is in its 5th year, as you'll be aware. It's the DAPU has a consistent success rate of about 80%, meaning 80% of those who have completed the programme have not come to police attention again, either for crime or non-crime domestic incidents, which is really telling. Again, I won't go through the data in that space, but I just thought that was worth highlighting because that's a really significant statistic. Around multi-agency public protection arrangements then, again, I won't go through the detail. The methodology is set out there of how it works. The key information here for us are the highlights around the statistics. So currently 1,045 registered sex offenders living in Suffolk is managed by the PPU team. Yeah. And no increase from the previous report. That's a high number. 217 are currently in custody. The team proactively manages the cohort annually. Over 100 new sexual harm prevention orders are obtained from the courts. And you'll see that the reoffending of RSOs for all offences in our county currently is at 0.96% for 2025, and sexual reoffending is the only recidivism rate currently at 0.86% for 2025, so really low numbers. So the numbers have been really quite stable over the period for wanted and outstanding suspects, and confident that we have really rigorous processes in place that are constantly reviewed around timeliness, but also high harm prioritisation in our outstanding suspects and wanted people cohorts. Probably then around IOM, really high level bits. I'm not going to go into a massive amount of detail. I would just draw attention to the Joint Police and Probation Training Package that's been delivered now to all IOM teams based off the National Training Package. The additional training is scheduled for October around engaging and motivating with 18 to 24-year-olds on the youth gang violence cohort, which I know is something that's close to the hearts of the people in this room. Yeah. With strategic discussions taking place to determine how the success of that cohort might be managed as they sit outside of the traditional IOM scoring methodology, but we want to make sure that we can really look in that space. And the IOM in the early stages of using the CLIC as a data analysis tool, which is providing really early insight into cohort demand and supervision patterns, which is a great thing for us moving forwards.
Good. No, thank you, Alice. Just picking up on that last point about the youngsters and the gang violence. It's something very close to our heart, for want of a better word. And of course, there is hope that you can turn lives around. And the background, some of it has been pretty awful, but hopefully nobody in this room has ever had to experience. But I do think that's worth pointing out. And I mention that because of the round table we had on trying to reduce reoffending a month or so ago, when the constabulary came along as well. I think there's some quite exciting initiatives I hope will emerge from that. One thing I did want to ask, so it's more of a general question, which leads me to one of the biggest difficulties, I think, again, it's not a policing problem, but has an impact, and that's this issue of housing, of course. If there was one thing we need to develop further, getting offenders to try and stop the recidivism and put them in housing where they've got accommodation and problem, we all know that can be quite difficult. What I really wanted to ask is, when you look at this work, are there particular areas that need to be improved, or not from the constabulary's perspective, but I mentioned housing as one, the support for individuals can be quite intensive. Everybody's different. I just wondered if you've got a comment, is there anything we can do to help on that? Make sure that other people or other agencies, I suppose, are being a commitment to it.
I think that's a really difficult one. As you know, we've got a huge number of partnership environments where we talk about the spectrum of offences, recidivism, engagement and diversionary opportunities, as well as support to victims. My comment would be we've probably got the greatest level of engagement that we've ever had at this stage from a number of people, and quality scrutiny of us as well. I think moving forward, it's going to be really interesting to watch the outcomes of people coming out of custody sooner. So obviously we're seeing cohorts of people being reduced due to the custody system being overwhelmed. And I think the ability for us to get in with partner agencies really early in some of those cohorts to make sure that there is a stable foundation for people coming out and the ability to thrive, I think is going to be interesting for us. I know it's a national challenge. I don't know ACCD, and if there's anything you particularly want to say in that space, and it's not something that we've had the opportunity to talk about before today. I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
No,
We're there to help, because I think
I think so. The early releases that we're seeing currently in that Ulster, again repeated from last year around SDS 14. I think it's really imperative that collectively as agencies we prepare for people being released. I think the challenge for us is making sure that we treat those people in the same way as we would other prison releases. So there's probably a discussion to be had about how we work under the auspices of the local criminal justice board about dealing with people that come out of prison to ensure that there are appropriate provisions for them that they can access in a timely manner, because we all know the contribution that having no housing, no job, no money can lead to repeat offending. So I do think there's something almost similar to we would do under domestic abuse, really, but with a different lens.
Yeah, now, and that's a very important point, because the concern is, of course, with early release programs, if they don't comply with whatever the conditions are for release, then of course, if you then have to find people, that's an extra burden, and in most cases on the constabulary, isn't it? Which
It is. I mean,
potentially an issue.
it is, and not to minimise the really important point that you raised, the importance of the out of court resolutions as well. Actually, that is short, sharp, and also a programme that people then invest in, and then they can start considering things like life changes, which might then mean that they're not coming out of their original housing anyway. Means that they can change their lives within their context. So the increase in the out of court resolutions, I think, is entirely appropriate in the way that as a system, criminal justice system, we should be working towards. Of course, that's not relevant or appropriate for everybody, and we still have the issue. But actually, if we can minimise, we as a criminal justice system, minimise the number of people that are at the high end, then the pressure on finding them housing should be more manageable.
I think that's a really good point. And again, looking at an economic assessment of the cost of prison places, getting for 60,000 quid a year, and recidivism. So, actually, that's just reminded me, Rachel, there is another point that if we look at 4.9, I was going to come to that because it's a good segue into it. The independent out of court resolution scrutiny panel. I've had compliments to the constabulary always attends, but I think this is something else, not for now. I don't want to blackball certain organisations, but I gather the attendance of certain organisations is variable at best. Not the constabulary, I want to really emphasise that. Because if we're going to join this up, it's important that certain other agencies do have a regular input to help. But perhaps that's something we have as an action, Kate, we can discuss out of the meeting.
I'll pick that up.
Or you, I don't know if it is.
Yeah, yes.
I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yes, I am, and I can discuss with you outside.
Okay, it's something that does need to be resolved, but no, it's good. And I'm sorry, I'm dancing about a bit because things will come up, but the other point I just want to emphasise on the domestic abuse perpetrator unit, been going for some time, very good results there. One thing I did want, 80% success rate. There aren't many things in life which regularly have an 80% success rate, I would suggest. But we do get people who fall out of it. Do any of them come back again? Do they rethink, or Or was that something you want to reflect on and come back on?
There are always opportunities for people to come back in. Obviously, we always have finite resources, so focusing on the cohorts that we can engage and develop, and we do that. But yeah, there is always the opportunity to revisit within a certain amount of time if we need to do that. I think our uptake is pretty successful so far, and we're already always learning. So 5th year, but there's always something new to learn constantly, and the opportunities that we're taking, and we're constantly environmentally scanning with other forces as well and other agencies to see where we can get good practice and implement it.
I remember when that was started a few years ago, there was a degree of scepticism in society in general, would it work? But it does work, which is very, very good. Sorry, I'm still going to reverse here. Looked at out-of-court resolutions, the income generated from the victim impact awareness courses. Have you got any data? I mean, how much are we talking about? Was that something you want to come back on?
I'll happily come back. I don't know off the top of my
No,
head.
I thought so. And the idea of the hardship.
You might know, yeah.
No,
Well, I don't mind.
I don't know the answer, but what I can speak to you about income generation per se within that team, that would be helpful, because there are some opportunities now around what we're doing and national interest in the
Okay.
current structure.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, thank you. And then on this evaluation project, has that been agreed now, the one with the university? That's at 4.1010. You mentioned it earlier.
I don't know. I know it's at proposal stage, and they're looking at the joint funding initiative around that. Quite how far that's come since this paper was drafted, because obviously the world moves really quite quickly at the moment.
Yeah.
So it may well be. I can give you an update on that once that's
Okay.
gonna.
It's still
It's still at procurement.
that Alice has mentioned.
Right. Any other?
I had a question on a specific point in terms of the research, which is just, really good conversation about the out-of-court disposals. Obviously, with the Leveson work and sentencing review, it feels like a moment in time in terms of making those work for the wider system. And noting Tim's comments around participation in the scrutiny panel and the fact we need to do it with all of our partners involved. It felt like the research is a really good opportunity to be able to provide a strong evidence base to actually say to the wider system, this is the impact it can have. We've almost got in the little bit that you've given to describe it, you've got almost all of the component parts of an economic analysis without quite going into that economic impact on the wider system. So it's a request really, that just as you work up that proposal, just to think about whether there's a step we could take to be able to provide a succinct sort of narrative to our partners about the economic benefit to the wider system of undertaking that, as well as all of the really important stuff around reducing reoffending and bits and pieces like that.
Yeah, we can definitely feed that in. I think the challenge is securing appropriate and accurate costs across the system, which will enable us to then say, this is saving X further down the tracks, if that makes sense. But no, definitely happy to feed that in.
I think even if, all these things are always models are always built on assumptions, aren't they?
They are.
But it is a powerful narrative when we're in a tight financial system, in a tight financial situation across the system to get people to put resources into it.
Where's you got a question?
Yeah, just in terms of management of offenders, just generally, and kind of in the partnership space as well, but obviously it's kind of the voluntary partnership review and of Columbia, which has been kind of spoken about publicly as well. But I appreciate that's very early days. But is there any kind of anything that you can comment on that in terms of where it's at, or?
Of Columbia was with an independent review, so that doesn't sit with us. It sits in that framework under the MAP provisions. I know there's a lot of interest in that at the moment, but we are complying with them. We've handed everything over. We voluntarily put ourselves into that space, and we're welcome with the independent review. There is no timeline around that. It will do as long as it needs to in order to report back.
And last question for me, Alice, on the maybe Jules or both of you, I don't know. On the bail management unit, that 5.1, the changes you've made, have you got any early indicators of how that's developing and what you can make it more efficient, more productive, or? Ready to say
I
it.
think it's really early, so obviously it was only as of August that the scope of the team has slightly reformed and expanded. So I think being sort of mid-September is too early for us to really say. I'm sure that the investment has been put in that place because we see the opportunity with the finite resource we've got in there to target some of the areas that we really want to be more efficient on.
So perhaps the next time we have this report, that can be mentioned. We'll have enough time then to look at. Okay, thanks. All right. Any other questions from anybody? No? All happy? Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Then the next one, which I think is the last part of the meeting, from 4. It was.
Doing such a brilliant job that we didn't.
No.
Very much money is thrown in.
Yeah, okay. Right, Alice, over to you again.
Approach then. So we know that we continue to experience both national and local upward trends in fraud, offending and crime reporting in that space, which is reflective of the broader growth in our cyber-enabled and financially motivated crime series that we're starting to see. So while the national framework for crime reporting remains really well established, the Constabulary is maintaining a stable approach to victim care and investigations, which is at the heart of everything that we do. The introduction of a number of new strategies, such as the National Fraud Strategy and the development of the Fraud and Cyber Crime Reporting and Analysis Service, has prompted some internal reviews for us and opportunities for us to reflect on what we're doing and how we can work alongside those. And although performance remains fairly challenging due to the complexity of the types of crimes and the evolving nature of offenders and the remote proximity of them and the technologies, we think that we're doing reasonably well in terms of developing our services alongside the evolving national materials. We continue to prioritise prevention and reduction initiatives with a really heavy focus on safeguarding those that we think are most vulnerable to fraud and the types of fraud that we are nationally seeing evolving. We've got a really strong multi-agency partnership and collaboration, particularly with trading standards, a number of financial institutions locally and nationally, and the safeguarding bodies who are all really keen just to do the preventative work we can in this space. You'll know that the inclusion of fraud is within the FPR, so the strategic policing requirement, and it's within the HMIC FRS inspection framework, reinforcing its prioritisation for us. And we know obviously that we'll be within the HMIC time period for inspection with the teams in at the moment and moving into the spring. Real highlights then for us as a force. So the trends across the data tables that you'll have looked at suggest not only a growing prevalence of fraud, but also a positive shift in victim engagement and confidence in the responses, not just locally, but also nationally. I've talked about the fraud strategic plan. This is managed by the Workflow Management Detective Chief Inspector, aligned with our investigative cohorts, and the overarching aims around reducing harm, reducing loss and minimising risk to the victims of frauds, as well as building our workforce capability and conducting our fraud investigations, working with partners to do that. The Constabulary's fraud unit has implemented a structured process whereby all fraud offences are now routed through the fraud FAU for initial evaluation, which is bringing some consistency in terms of what victims can expect from us and the pathways around the organisation. It's also making sure that we've got prioritisation in line with the fraud investigation model, which is the framework designed specifically to reflect the complex and evolving nature of fraud and where the opportunities to intervene early are. Around particular crime types then, if you move to 3.10, you'll see some commentary there around us actively working around specific around money mules, individuals who move illicit funds through banking inquiries, even those people who are found to have no prior offending history, which is increasingly normal in this space. The use of cease and desist notices is a recognised disruption tactic now from the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau, and we're working in that space and learning from them. Our Fraud and Protect and Prevent Officer in Constabulary was introduced just last year, and you'll be aware of how that works. This mirrors the second post, which is now within trading standards. It's jointly funded by the local authority and plays a key role in delivering fraud prevention and protection initiatives aligned with the National Fraud Investigation Model. So really close work between us and Suffolk Trading Standards and the partner agencies, including the business community now in this space. And the role involves coordinating multi-agency efforts, supporting the frontline policing officers with the fraud awareness training and providing specific advice and guidance, as well as delivering presentations to raise public and organisational awareness around the constabulary and the county at large. In the OCG space then, so organised criminal groups, we're actively focused on identifying OCGs involved in fraud through targeted tasking, intelligence development, and work with the cyber specialist capability team. This team receives the cyber fraud referrals from the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau, and through the newly implemented processes, we expect to see an increase in intelligence submissions and earlier preventative opportunities. So we'll be monitoring what through flow of data and investigations as a result of that in the coming months looks like. Just to touch on the cyber specialist capability team then, this includes 2 embedded cyber security advisors. They provide the tailored support to our victims of cyber fraud, not just individuals but businesses as well. And the teams develop some bespoke systems that generate personalised written advice for victims aimed at reducing the risk of repeat victimisation and enhancing their digital resilience, which we know is a global challenge. We maintain a pool of detectives within our CID department who have undertaken the Foundation Models of Fraud Investigation course, so they're not just mainstream, they have also done that enhanced training. And around supporting victims, our team is engaged with the National Economic Crime Victim Care Unit. They're a team within the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau who provide 2-tiered support systems for victims of fraud and cybercrime across England and Wales. And they are proving to be really useful for us. You'll also be really pleased to know that staff within our Crime Coordination Centre, so our CCC Contact Control Room, have now got information and guidance provided to them, and they can then share that with victims at the front door to the organisation when people are contacting us. And we're compliant with the National Protocol of updating victims when investigation is recorded locally after an NFIB referral. I've touched on HMIC, so I won't go through that too much more. So we're really engaged, not just within the National Forum, but also we attend regularly regional meetings, which look at quarterly assessments of our position of our force and regional delivery of the strategy and action plan using the model of the 4 Ps. Fraud Economic Crime app is now available, designed and developed by the City of London Fraud Operations team and the Economic Cybercrime Academy. You'll see within the paper, we're currently working through what the timelines will be for delivery of the fraud app and the availability that it will be made to staff. And you'll see at 9.4 that the UK government is replacing the existing action fraud system with the Fraud and Cybercrime Reporting and Analysis Centre. This is designed to be a modernised platform. So it will deliver high quality intelligence packages to police forces, enabling faster and more effective investigations. We're looking forward to seeing how that develops. It was expected to go live in the spring, however it was delayed, so we are still anticipating that starting and us moving into the space of receiving those and getting into business as usual with that. I think probably we'll stop there. The only thing I haven't said is that there are significant opportunities for us moving forwards to develop our work into the multi-agency hub and safeguarding hubs that we've got already, not just around our investigation and our prevention, but we are also looking at further join up between our crime harm hub, which we developed under the new policing model, existing CID and existing MASH provisions, and how they will have an enhanced opportunity to speak to each other as the referrals increase from the national teams.
Okay. Just on that last point then, Alice, so the multi-agency work, and again, fraud can be complex in many different connotations, and it's a huge growth area, sadly. What other agencies, I mean, like, for example, talking about business, financial services, there's always the national dimension, but also the local dimension. Just wondered, is that the sort of thing you're looking at? Or?
Yeah, there's really significant partnership activity in this space, and when we receive new materials or new pieces of work, we work with partners to have a look at what the context for Suffolk might look like, and then we speak to not just those partners in terms of what the opportunities are to develop. We've now got the next stage delivery options where we're using our community policing teams to make sure that we go out and we do the local approach. So the briefings around that space are really interesting, and I think with the growth of our neighbourhood teams, the opportunity for us to do that in an even more engaged way moving forwards with our partners is probably something that we'll start to really benefit from.
Yeah, no, raising awareness.
We've got strategic coordination, but then we've got the tactical engagement around it as well.
Okay, no, well that's good to know. You do comment at 11.4 about the we've got a small number of dedicated fraud staff. Any plans for the future?
I don't think there's a plan immediately for us to increase in that space. Their workloads are proportionate in comparison to where other things around the organisation are, and we have to be really cognizant of your plan around how we will prioritise, as well as the chief's plan. And we continue to work in high harm areas. There is always the ability for us to flex if we need to, if we see significant referrals or changes in crime types. We've got the agility within the organisation to flex, and the skills now and the developing training packages in numerous areas of the organisation. If we needed to surge in a particular area, we could do so.
At 11.5, that comment about tackling, well, organised crime groups. I just wondered if you could expand on that a bit. I know ERSU, Eastern Region Special Operations Unit, obviously has a role in that, because it demonstrates the complexity. I wonder if you could expand a bit more on that comment.
Yeah, I think we're symptomatic of a national challenge in identifying patterns and behaviours of organised crime groups operating in this space. I think it's a global challenge for us. And then in doing so, moving it forwards, we don't map very many OCGs associated to fraud and fiscal challenges, particularly in our county, same as the region. It would be really interesting to see, with the changing strategic structures and the national reporting mechanisms changing, it'd be really interesting to see whether, when we're starting to receive more intelligence and referrals, our ability to join the dots up and then to target harden will be really interesting to see if that affects our OCG management and measuring.
I presume that'll take a little while, because it's only just happened.
Yeah.
I think many of us, I certainly was pretty critical of action fraud, because it has such a high threshold, and if you've got a small business or individual, it almost came across as a degree of ambivalence. Well, that's not really on the register for us. Well, having been a victim of fraud myself some years ago, that was through credit card, I got the money back, but that's not the point. And that was an international scam, as I've said before.
I think this is the important element, isn't it? And Alice has explained it extremely well, but we all appreciate that most fraud doesn't have geographical boundaries. So when there's a small force and a small team within that force county area, the important thing for us is that initial assessment. And then, as Alice has said, we can flex our own resources, but more times than not, if it's a serious element, then it is going to expand outside of the county area, and it's entirely appropriate. We pay into and provide resourcing into ERSU, the regional Eastern Unit. And if not them, then there's the National Crime Agency for more global and international joining up of those dots. And if there was ever an area that emphasises the fact that we are now moving beyond geographical boundaries, it is this area of fraud.
Absolutely, entirely agree. And good to see that partnership with trading standards is flourishing. I think would be fair to say. We'll look at the data. Obviously, it's not been going that long, so that's good. And one question we did have, if we go back to page 3 and the table at the top there, not all the figures add up, which is because they're not. But can you just unpick that? The 3 main types there at the first, third, and fourth line. Are they looking at different areas? They're not meant to all add up as such a combined total.
I think they are all entirely different measures. So whether they're all, I don't think they would add up. But let me take that away, Tim, and come back to you.
Could you? I mean, I think that's something we all. But that would be useful just to know, so we can contextualise it better. I mentioned about organised crime groups. So, recent capacity. You mentioned the fraud act. That's at 9.3 then. Any idea what the timescale is for that?
Be looking towards the end of 2026, although that could change.
Right, a little while yet. Okay. Again, that should be helpful. Well, I think we covered it.
Just one more, back to the table on page 3. Just really interested in how the investigations with a positive outcome, how is that defined? What kind does that actually constitute, and how does it relate to solve rates? Because we've got, I think, from the latest data 86, that has gone down a bit, but what
as a constabulary, we measure positive outcomes as the ability to either arrest or interview somebody for an offence. That is different to a charge or a conviction or a outcome around positive out of court disposal. So slightly, there's a real nuance there around what sits in the category and how the definition reads across. So there will be differences between the two.
This is a bit, I suppose, more of an opinion than anything else. the changes from Action Fraud to the new national system, I know it's very early days. From your view, do you think it's likely to be an improvement? I'm not, well, I'm putting you on the spot, but the changes that you will be aware of, do you think they stand a very good chance of making a fundamental difference?
I'm a glass three-quarters full person every day, so
Yeah.
I do think we know that even if it didn't deliver what we hope it will, and I think it will, we know that the engaged energy, talk, new materials, investment, and then pathways in that space always creates more conversations and opportunities for us to develop our approaches nationally, regionally, and locally. I'm really confident that we will start to see something quite different out of this, but I do think it takes time for
Yeah, sure.
the ecosystem around it to evolve. So I think it will take quite some time before we can really tangibly say what the outcomes are as a result, or the outputs for Suffolk as a result of some of the changes that will come.
Hopefully well, it's an evolutionary process, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. As long as people there who are overseeing it are listening and are prepared to be flexible and adapting and improve it, because fraud patterns have changed enormously just since I've been here, and they've probably changed from year to year.
If I may, I think with the digital technological improvements, developments that we're all seeing in everyday life, it will continue to change. The challenge for us all in the system, and again, not just policing, is for us to keep up with those changes in order to investigate what's happening. So to really re-emphasise the point that Alice has already made, the fact that something different is being put into place and that it is receiving the attention of all of the different agencies involved is a good thing. And the evolution is what we now need to keep an eye on in order to keep up with that constant change. And with any investigation in any criminal aspect over the years that I've been involved with, those perpetrators that want to max it out to the full will stay one step ahead to try and change their approaches. So it's a constant evolving of a process, and the investigations have to keep up with where they are with their methods and what they see as opportunities to commit crime.
So inevitably, you're always playing catch up.
Exactly, but
Quite what we go.
our challenge is to be just one step behind, or hopefully maybe even one step ahead. As Alice referenced, the 4 Ps, one of those is prevent, and the prevention is a key part of what we do.
Good. Okay, any other points?
Just one quick one, which was just around HMIC FRS, which obviously we've got the first inspection on board. So just interested in your our preparedness and what sort of perception of where we might sit, and if there's any work in terms of like peer assessments or anything to kind of give us a ground, and that it's the first time going to be assessed by.
I think to give Alice a break on speaking and to throw Rob into the meeting, but Rob leads on the HMIC FRS preparation for the various inspections that we undergo. Clearly, you've had the paper here, which covers a lot of the detail. We are of a certain size that can achieve a certain amount. What we have within the county, I believe, and within the constabulary, is a lot more knowledge that we bring in, and we'd like to do a lot more if our resourcing was even higher and more capable. But Rob, I don't know if you want to just spend a couple of minutes in terms of our specific preparation around fraud.
Yeah, we have a structure with a goal group looking at all the national thematics, and fraud is on there. We haven't got any specific intelligence on our readiness. I would say that and kind of what that will look like. I'm happy to, if we get notice of an inspection, to bring that back. But I'd say the paper shows we're well prepared, albeit it's a period of transition and making sure we sort of integrate with some of those national changes as effectively as we should be.
But any other points? Done? Any other business? I haven't got any. I don't know if anybody else has. No. Right. Well, that concludes the public part of the meeting. So we're going to ask colleagues on online to disappear, metaphorically, of course.